All right, well, I'll go ahead and kick things off. Welcome everybody to our seminar regarding delinquencies and delinquency policy resolutions. If you don't know me, my name is Danielle Frederick. I am the new business development manager for Kirkpatrick Management. So we are happy that you are here. We're happy that you are spending your lunch hour with us. Just a quick announcement for those of you who may not know, it's a really big year for Kirkpatrick Management. We are actually celebrating our 50th year in business this year, which we're super excited about. So we just wanted to say thank you for partnering with us and serving on your board of directors, because we know that that's not always an easy task. Our next seminar for our board members is going to be April 6th. It will be at noon, and it's going to be kind of a board boot camp. We will be covering a wide range of topics such as contracts, requests for proposals, how to take meeting minutes, things like that. So more information will come on that, but if you want to go ahead and mark your calendars, it will be April 6th at noon. So today, I would like to introduce our presenters. First off, we're going to have Joe Holland. He will be answering questions in the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, you should see a Q&A button. You can put your questions in there and we will answer them throughout. But Joe Holland, he has been with our company for 15 years. He's been in accounting the entire time. He's filled multiple positions for us, doing multiple different things throughout the 15 years. And Joe actually became a grandpa about a year ago. So a very exciting time in his life. And then we also have Ms. Carla Thompson on the call. She will also be taking questions in the Q&A. Ms. Carla Thompson, she's been with our company for 17 years. She is the Director of Accounting. And again, she's filled multiple different roles throughout her 17 years here, but started in accounting with collections, accounts receivables, and then just kind of does a big array of things now. So Carla has two really big dogs. They're a boxer German Shepherd mix. She's brought them into the office a couple of times when we've done our Bring Your Dog to Work Day, which has been fun. So that's just a little bit more about Carla. And then our main presenter this afternoon is going to be TJ Inman. TJ's been with Kirkpatrick for about 7 years. And I learned that TJ really enjoys folk and bluegrass music, which I did not know before this. But his favorite artist is Billy Strings. I've never heard of Billy Strings. I'm interested to see if you guys have heard of Billy Strings. So if you have, please put that in the Q&A. I have a feeling TJ is kind of the minority here on that. But we are really lucky. Kirkpatrick is really lucky to have Carla, Joe, and TJ on our accounting team, despite the fact that they're all IU fans. So personally, I'm a big Purdue fan. So it's a very big weekend for us. If things don't go the way I hope them to go, I probably will avoid the three of them for a while. But with that being said, they are the best in the business, in my opinion, and obviously the best to give this presentation today. So TJ, I will kick it over to you and you can start the presentation.
Thank you, Danielle, for the introduction, and thank you everybody that's on the webinar with us for giving us your time. We do appreciate it. Hopefully you learn a couple of things, and just a kind of a precursor here. If you have specific delinquency questions about one specific account, we cannot get into discussions about individual accounts on this call. We can, if you want to send an email to accounting or to your property manager with any specific questions you have, we'll definitely get back to you as soon as we can on that. So questions, stick to just general delinquency questions and we'll be able to answer those. So we'll get started. I'm really happy to be talking to everybody today about this. I know it's not a topic that's all that pleasant, attempting to collect money that is owed, but as everybody on this call knows, assessments and dues being paid are the lifeblood of the association. If owners do not hold up their end of the bargain, the association is unable to pay vendors, unable to pay to meet your budget and to be able to keep the association healthy. So incredibly important, even if it's not always the most pleasant thing. Start. Okay, so accounts receivable, just in general, at the base level, measures the money that homeowners owe to the association, condo or homeowners, for the services that the association provides. Unfortunately, there are times when homeowners do not pay those dues. Our AR team, as soon as that invoice gets generated, which is after the board meets, determines the budget, determines what the dues are going to be, the invoice gets sent out by the AR team, our coupons department here. Once the homeowner gets that, they are obligated to pay those dues. You may get complaints from homeowners that, well, you know, the landscaping is not being done to the standard that I want it to be, or I'm not going to pay my dues until I get approval for this project that I want done in my backyard. Unfortunately for the homeowner, they enter into a contract as soon as they purchase their property that binds them to those covenants, which does include payment of dues. When they do not pay those dues, we have a set process that we follow. We're going to get into that. After we follow that process, if a homeowner still has not paid those dues, collection agency may have to get involved to help collect those outstanding debts. So our goal is always to make sure that we follow the procedure put in place by the association and ourselves to the best of our ability, follow those best practices to set the association up for successful collection of those debt or of that debt through the collection attorney. So the procedure there is the delinquency process resolution or policy resolution, and that's DPR for short. And we're going to talk about the DPR here today. Once that dues amount is determined, payment invoices get sent out. Most homeowners pay no problem. We don't have any issues whatsoever. That's the ideal. Unfortunately, some are not going to pay. So the DPR is what we use as a set policy to collect those dues. A few years back, Kirkpatrick Management consulted with one of our main collections firms that we use, Eats, Murray & Pugh, to create a standard template that they felt protected the HOA in the event that we had to collect unpaid debt. There were times previously that our DPRs were very specific, and owners would, for lack of a better term, get off on a technicality in small claims court. For instance, we had an association that had in their DPR that the first and second notice had to go out 30 days apart. That's the exact language it used, was first notice goes out on the first of the month, second notice must go out 30 days later. We had an instance in small claims court where our notice for the second notice went out 35 days later. Now, that benefited the homeowner. It gave them 5 extra days, but the magistrate that we were in front of that day determined that we did not follow the delinquency policy resolution, and they waived attorney fees, which meant that the association had to pay the attorney costs, not the homeowner. The homeowner still had to pay the principal amount, but still it cost the association money. Instances like that caused us to go back with Eats, Murray & Pugh and create a more generic template that does not include those exact dates or exact timeframes. Now, we still do follow those timeframes. It's just not listed in this document that goes in front of the judge in small claims court. So the key parts of this, and I'm not going to insult anybody's intelligence and read through this whole thing. About DPRs, if you have any questions about your DPR, what yours is for your community, setting up a new one, if you're not pleased with the process that you currently have in place, please contact your property manager, ask them about the DPR. They will get with accounting. and we will go over that exact DPR, go over the specifics with you or with the property manager. And if a new one is desired, we can get that set up for you. But the key things that this lays out are assessments are due and payable before each payment period, with the due dates being set by the directors of the association. So the board is setting the due dates. Payment has to be received by the due date. The association shall send out 2 notices. Most of our communities send out 3. But for the purposes of our generic DPR, we just put shall send out 2 notices. Any payment not received by that applicable due date gets a late charge. For this community, it's $20, but that's going to be, a variable for each community. And then if the owner does not enter into a pay plan or pay in full after the assessments get sent out, or after the notices get sent out, the association may turn the matter over to the attorney. So the association is not required to, but once the policy is followed, that option does exist, and this document allows for that. The covenants for each association also allow for recovery of assessments, recovery of late fees, recovery for the management fee, and for the attorney costs. So the covenants allow for you to collect those in small claims court if it's needed. And then the bottom part there is how the payments get applied. So the attorney fees get paid first, collection costs get paid second, then late fees, finally the outstanding assessments. So an owner has to pay each of those things to be able to clear their debt. They can't just pay the assessment or the attorney fees and be caught up. They can't just pay the assessment and get caught up. They have to pay the entirety of their debt to clear the debt. So reminder notices, kind of in general, we do send out at least 1 final notice. That is required. Every community we have, you have to send at least 1 final notice that gives the homeowner exactly what's going to happen if they fail to pay, or what could happen if they fail to pay. However, most of our communities, the most common policy we have is 3 notices go out. So there's the due date, typically on the 1st of a month. There's the late date, typically after 30 days, but again, that's a variable that goes by community. And then a notice gets sent. 30 days later, another notice gets sent. That's the second notice. 30 days later, the final notice goes out, and that final notice gives the owner 10 days and lets them know failure to pay could result in the account being sent to a collections attorney, and the attorney fees that would be charged would be the responsibility of the homeowner and added to the owner's debt. And again, if you're interested in changing your delinquency setup, let your property manager know. The only advice on that, ideally you change your policy prior to a new billing cycle occurring. For instance, if you have a semi-annual community, you'd want to have a new policy in place prior to July, but it would not go into effect until July 1st when that new billing cycle starts. So we would not want to change a policy in the middle of a billing cycle. But if you'd like to talk about changing that up, maybe shortening the amount or lengthening the amount of time that you give owners to get those things paid, contact your property manager and we can go over that with you. The templates here for our notices, every community has the same template that we use. The first and second template are the exact same. And you'll notice they've got the community information on the top with the date, owner's information on the left after that. It's labeled a reminder notice, and we try to be as non-threatening as possible. Of course, anybody getting a notice, sometimes it's going to rub people the wrong way. We understand that. That's why we're here to answer the phones, talk people through things like that, any issues that they have with it. But our hope is that this is just what it says, a friendly reminder. Sometimes people forget. We understand that. Here's your balance. And it gives them instructions about how to make up the amount that they currently owe. Our final notice is a little different. It's going to be a bolder face type on the top there, final notice. It's letting them know the account is delinquent, gives them the total balance. And then it includes that language, as you know, your association has the right to seek legal remedies against any owner whose account is in arrears. And it gives them a timeline. Our first and second notice do not give timelines. The final notice does. Pay within 10 days of the date of this letter. Failure to do so is going to result in legal, or could result in legal action being taken. If it's taken, court costs, legal fees, and our $75 case management fee are the responsibility of the owner. Again, it gives them that information. If you want to talk about the account, make a pay plan, give us a call, and we'll go through the account with you. So the final notice, a little different in that it does provide for the association to collect those additional fees that could be incurred if the account goes to collections. This is one of the tools that board members have available to them and property managers have available to them. There are several different versions of the AR aging report. This one's the one that I find the most useful. Gives you the account with the owner's name, the total amount due, the charges that they have not paid. In this case, you're looking at a couple of months with the late fees, and then that status, that third column over there from the left, status is going to be where they are at in the delinquency process. So Oscar and McLovin there, they've only gotten a first notice. They only owe $60 a piece. The top account, they're in collections approval. Now that status we'll get into in just a second. That is indicating that they have received all their notices and still have not paid. So the notices did not prompt a payment or a contact for a payment plan with KMC. So they are now in a collections approval status, which means they can go to the attorney for collections. So what happens if those notices don't work? How does something get into that collections approval status, and where do we go from there? So the 10-day period for that final notice passes without payment. Our AR department, KMC's AR department, notifies the property manager that one or more accounts in one of their communities is eligible for collections. The property manager then notifies the board and asks for approval to proceed with collections. Very important point, KMC is not going to turn over accounts for collections on our own. We will, that is a board decision 100% of the time. It's your community, and we feel it's incredibly important for you guys to make the decision on how you want your delinquencies to operate. We are here to do it the way that you want it done. So when an account is ready for collections, the board will be notified and gets to make that decision. Now there's several avenues you can go from there. You can turn the account over to collections. You can have us send another final notice. Sometimes, board members are aware of issues within the community, and hey, let's give them a little bit more time. Let's have another final notice sent and see what happens. Or maybe somebody only owes a small amount of money, and you don't want to send an owner to collections for $150 debt. So you just want to wait until that next billing cycle. That's fine too. We just put an account right back into a notice status and continue the notice process. So our goal is to not have an account just sit there with nothing happening, but it does not have to go to collections. We can send more notices. We can wait till the next billing cycle. Or if you say, yeah, we've been through the process, let's move forward and proceed with collections. Once we get approval to do so, then we initiate that step, but it will not happen until a board gives that okay to do so. So once a board chooses to have an account sent to collections, KMC, the first thing that we do is put a $75 management fee onto the account ledger. That $75 covers the additional time that we put into an account that goes to collections, the work that we do with the collections attorney to make sure that things are handled the right way, and that if we get into a contested court case, that KMC has done our part to make sure the association is protected. Now, the HOA pays that $75 management fee to KMC. It goes on the owner's ledger, and the owner is reimbursing the HOA when the debt gets collected. The collections attorney, their first step is always to verify the ownership information, mailing address, and make sure that we sent out the notices. We send them a copy of the ledger, a copy of the notices. Once they've determined everything is correct and a procedure has been followed, they will send out what's called a demand letter. This demand letter is very similar to the final notice that Kirkpatrick Management sends. As you can imagine, though, if an attorney's letterhead is on it, it gets taken a little bit more seriously, sometimes by owners. Oftentimes, owners that are repeat offenders and not paying, we'll see a cycle of Kirkpatrick sends our first notice, our second notice, our final notice, no response. The attorney sends a notice, and within a couple of days, the owner has contacted the attorney, paid the debt, and moved forward. So a lot of times that solves it. They get 45 days with that demand letter. They can dispute the debt, enter into an agreed payment plan with the attorney, or unfortunately, sometimes continue to not respond. If the 45 days passes, still no response, still no payment, the collections attorney sends KMC's AR department an affidavit of debt. That's called an AOD in short, and that's what we fill out that Eads, Murray and Pugh, or Thrasher, Bushman and Buchel, or Kovach, Schifrin and Nesbitt, any of our collections attorneys send us, we fill them out, and that's what they use to file in small claims court. Once they file, they wait for a hearing date. Now, the owner can still enter into a pay plan right up until the hearing day. So if you're going through a timeline in your head, you could have 30 days after the original due date before you get a first notice, 30 days after a first notice before the second, 30 days after the second until the final. So that's 90 days right there. The final gives another 10, that's 100. The attorney's letter gives 45, that's 145 days. So the owners have had ample amount of time to get into a pay plan or make a payment, or if they believe that there's an issue with the account and that we are not processing their payments correctly, they've had ample time to address that as well. And they still have time, even after that letter, to resolve things. However, once you reach that hearing date, there's going to be additional court costs, there's going to be additional attorney fees placed onto the ledger's account. So the longer the owner lets things go on without addressing it, the more expensive it does get. So if a hearing occurs, obviously our goal is to help the HOA get a judgment. Kirkpatrick Management has a representative that is there in court to act as the witness for the HOA. That's not something board members have to do, not something that anybody on the board will have to deal with. Kirkpatrick Management takes care of that as a representative of the HOA. If we get that judgment, the owner has 30 days to pay the judgment. Obviously, at that point, it's something that could impact their credit because it would be public record at that point. Prior to that, credit's not impacted because we don't report to credit agencies. The collections attorneys do not either, but once it becomes public record, it could impact an owner's credit. If they fail to pay the judgment within that 30-day window, the association does still have options. One of those is garnish wages. Up to 25% of take-home pay can be given out as an award in a garnishment. So small claims court's not the only weapon or tool that the HOA has to kind of enforce the payment of their dues. At any point, the association can also choose to file a lien. So a lot of people have heard of mortgage liens. An HOA lien acts the same. It's always in second position below the mortgage lien, but the association can file a lien. That's going to cost right around $225 for the association to take that step. However, there are certainly times where that is advantageous for the association to do. Examples of that would be if an owner is considered judgment proof if they are perhaps elderly and are not employed. We cannot garnish Social Security wages. It can only be, living workable wages that can be garnished. So in that case, they're considered judgment proof, and a lien might be the more prudent course of action. If you are aware that an owner is attempting to sell a property and they have a balance, a lien might be something you consider as well. That lien is going to protect the association in any case that the property is sold. That lien's going to pop up on the title search. Title company will contact us and the collection attorney, and we'll get the full payoff if they are going to move forward with selling that property. So that can be a tool that the HOA uses. Now, lien also opens the door for kind of that last measure, which is a lien foreclosure. Foreclosure, we will get a lot of surprised homeowners when that happens saying, wait, I can have my property taken, I can have my house taken by not paying association dues. The answer is yes. That's not anything that should be taken lightly. It is not something that we take any pleasure in, and no board takes pleasure in having to take that step. But it is there for the association if it's determined necessary because other avenues have not worked. Now, that process can be very lengthy and pretty expensive. So it is something to consider very seriously before moving forward. It's usually going to cost you anywhere from $2,500 to $3,000 to go through that process. And it can take up to 9 months. And I've seen ones that have taken longer, either because of delays in the court or filings by the owner. So it's definitely a lengthy process, and there's a lot of costs involved, and it's not pleasant at all either. So why would you go that route? It sounds miserable, and at times it can be. However, as a last resort, it can be pretty effective. We have a lot of examples of owners that do not contact us at all with any of our notices, any of our invoices, any of the attorney's attempts to contact them. They're a complete no-show until they get notice that they're being foreclosed on. And typically right after that, you get a phone call and they want to work something out. And that's still possible. Even after you file foreclosure, they can still enter into a pay plan. They can still pay off their debt. They can pay the whole thing and have it released entirely. But if that fails, worst case scenario, the association gets the new owner into that property, ideally one that pays the dues, and you don't have that sunk cost every month or every billing cycle. So that's one benefit of it. It is possible through a sheriff's sale or through a foreclosure auction that the association does get paid and gets that debt entirely paid off through the sale. Again, the mortgage has the first priority, but if that mortgage lien gets paid off and there's still proceeds left to pay the association can get paid in full and have a new owner in place. There are a few rare occasions where the association has taken title to the property they foreclosed on. The association now owns it to either use as rental income or turn around and sell for income as well. A lot of associations do not want that hassle at all, but it has been an effective source of income for at least a couple of our communities before. So there's lots of avenues things can go down in the collections process, but the association does have a lot of tools at their disposal to clean up debt. The first kind of important thing you want to do is have that established collections policy. Again, if you're not sure about what your policy is, you want to change your policy, please contact your property manager and have them look at it, have them give it the counting. We can either set you up with the new one that maybe shortens the policy, or one that lengthens it, gives owners a little bit more time. But if you have any questions about that, contact your property manager. Number two is going to be consistent. And this one is really important because it's going to be tempting for boards to look at each account individually and know, oh, well, I know Mr. and Mrs. Smith have this going on in their life. They just had an illness and they've fallen behind. I don't know anything about Mr. and Mrs. Jones. They owe $500. Let's move forward with collections on them. That's going to be tempting to do and understandable. I mean, life happens, and these are your neighbors. You're going to be aware of certain circumstances with some of them, and others you're not going to know at all. But if you get into that gray area of treating certain accounts differently, you're opening the association up to potential lawsuits. And that's not a place that you want to be. So whether it is accepting pay plans, the threshold that you turn accounts over for collections, choosing when to agree to settlements, choosing which owners to allow pay plans at all, you want to have a set policy and stick to it. Getting into gray area, while it can be tempting because some of the stories that people have are, very emotional and difficult to move forward with collection to get somebody in tough circumstances. When you get into the gray area of it, it opens up a can of worms. Remember that the HOA cannot make a homeowner pay his or her dues. We can send out notices right on schedule. We can send out invoices right on schedule. We can send email reminders. We can, change the way our notices look. We can do everything exactly right, and some owners are still not going to pay. And that can be frustrating because it can hurt the HOA, it can hurt the rest of your neighbors, that you then have to increase dues to reach your budget or have special assessments to make up the lost income that you're not bringing in from a few owners that don't pay. But you do have options at your disposal to get rid of that debt. One of those is the removal of privileges or amenities like a swimming pool, right? It's common practice that an owner that has a delinquent account does not get swimming pool access. And without fail, and everybody at KMC will speak to this, one of our busiest times is right after those pools open and right before those pools open. People know, I want to go to the pool. My kids are home from school. They're driving me crazy. I need to go to the pool. And they'll go find out, oh, wait, no, I didn't pay. I can't get in. My key card doesn't work. And we get a call. How do I pay online to take care of this right now so I can use the pool? They didn't care for 6 months before, but now if the pool's on the line, they got to pay. And that's one of the things you can do is that those dues and having a good standing account, voting privileges and meetings, those amenities are something that definitely is a weapon at your disposal to make sure people are compliant. Small claims collections, again, that's going to be hoping that the attorney's letter is enough to prompt people into payment. Oh, shoot, I got a letter from an attorney. Now it's serious. I got to pay. It's usually what happens. Sometimes it has to go to a small claims collections court and you get a judgment. If the owner still doesn't pay, you've got that garnishment option. And at any point, you have the lien. And if you have to, ultimately the foreclosure. Again, not anything that should be taken lightly or entered into without both eyes open. But when necessary, that can be a good tool as well. So homeowners have a contractual responsibility to pay their fees on time. The responsibility of the board is to make sure you're doing what's best for the entire community. And sometimes that means pursuing collections, an unpleasant process, but our goal as accounts receivable here at KMC is to make sure that we are collecting dues in a timely fashion, posting dues in a timely fashion, and following the delinquency process that each board wants to have in place for their community. So that when it comes time to make a decision on turning accounts over for collections, you as a board are comfortable and confident that things have been handled fairly in the way that you want them handled. So I thank everybody for your time. And if you have any questions, please let us know. I would love to help however we can.
So TJ,
Yeah.
can you, so there are some neighborhoods that don't have a lot of collections issues, but we still would like to have a delinquency policy resolution for them. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And that's great if a community doesn't have any delinquency issues whatsoever. That's great. But what happens when you do? We want to have that policy in place. And that's not even for accounts that have to go to the attorney. It's a good thing to have that collections policy in place if any notices are being sent at all, so that we as a company know what it is the board wants in terms of those notices. And then number two, so the owners know what to expect. A lot of times we do have communities that send out those DPRs with their coupons, with their invoices. They send out those DPRs to owners. That's not required, but we do have a lot of communities that do that, and we'll get questions from owners asking, hey, is this the policy that happens? And then we can go over with them so that they know exactly what to expect. But we do think it is best practice for every association, regardless of how severe or minor your delinquency issues might be, to have that DPR in place. And if you're not sure if you have one, check with your CAM, your property manager, and we'll make sure one gets sent over. The process to get it in place is not hard. We can write it up for you, same day, get it back to you, and it can be an e-signature through Adobe online or in person at a meeting. And we'll get that in place on our system.
There is a good question on here by Susan that we answered, but it's in case you don't read the notes and stuff. Susan asked, should any member of the board ever have personal contact with an owner who failed to pay? As far as should they go try and get them to pay, or what's your general rule of thumb on that, TJ?
Yeah, in general, the answer to that is no. Now, if you're walking on the sidewalk, they know you're a board member, you're out walking your dog, they come down the street, hey, I got this letter from the attorney and this is crazy. I've lived here for 15 years and I've never been late. How can we get this resolved? It's going to be difficult for you to just stand there and say, I can't talk about that. Reality is that you're having contact with them right there. But the rule of thumb on that's going to be refer them to the collections attorney. Worst case, refer them to Kirkpatrick Management Company. The reason for that is not to be rude to the owner. The reason is to protect the HOA. And anything in a situation like that gets said by a board member, even if it's 100% accurate, that could hurt the HOA in collecting attorney fees, which it's not, oh, good, the homeowner has to pay those. Well, somebody does. The attorney's not writing their fees off. They're not taking a pay cut. So somebody has to pay it. And if the owner isn't found responsible by the court because of something that a board member accidentally said in a conversation with that owner, that's money coming out of the association's pocket because the owner will not be reimbursing the association. So in general, any conversations about specific delinquencies with specific owners, particularly ones in collections, your best off, referring them to the collections attorney, which they will have information on how to contact those attorneys. It's in the letters that they get. If they're aware they're in collections, then they are aware of how to get in contact with the collections attorney. So that's going to be the best bet for any board member.
There's one question from Tom Campbell on here, and it kind of, I think you touched on it a little bit, but probably just go kind of what's the advantage of initially going for a lien or initially going for a small claims court? Is that just as a company, do we prefer one over the other? Or is that a call that a board of directors is going to make?
Yeah, so we will recommend certain things, but ultimately it is going to be the decision of the board which route you want to go. Now, the advantage of going a lien in some instances, the first instance where, and common is where that's going to come up, is we turn an account over, the collections attorney does their research on the owner and finds, oh, this owner is 85 years old, probably doesn't have a full-time position, probably that means they don't have wages to garnish, which, if that's the case, a small claims judgment is largely going to be meaningless and unenforceable. The only thing that would compel that owner to pay because of a judgment is just because they want to do it. They don't want that on their credit score. But you can't garnish Social Security wages. So in that case, a lot of times the collection attorney will contact us and say, hey, this owner is elderly, probably don't have a full-time position. We would recommend a lien in this case. Kirkpatrick Management would forward that to the board and get approval. Hey, the collections attorney is recommending a lien. Do you approve? Still the association's call, but you're getting guidance on what the expert thinks is best in that case. So there are some instances where that is the case. Others would be that it's a high balance. Particularly on monthly condos where balances can escalate pretty quick. We have some monthly condos that are $500 plus in their dues. We mentioned here that the process can take, 3 to 4 months before it is at a small claims level. So you're looking at $1,500 to $2,000 without any of the additional fees already on a balance. And in cases like that, the attorney will often say, hey, this has reached a balance where a lien and a foreclosure might be our best bet. So we get the advice from, or the opinion of the attorney on what they think is best, relay that to the board with that guidance, but it is ultimately still the board's call which path they want to pursue.
Okay. If a board wants to send a notice by certified mail, that's just something they can talk to their CAM about, and you guys can adjust to that. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, we do have that option. On certified, the collections attorneys are of the opinion that is detrimental to the HOA. Reason being that the burden of proof is, in our standard policy, the burden of proof is on the homeowner, right? We are sending notices. We can prove that we sent notices. That's what we can do. We provide those copies of notices knowing they were sent, but we don't track them. They're not certified, so we're not 100% sure they were received. Now, with certified, the burden of proof goes to the association. The association has to prove this was certified, and here's the signature showing the owner received it. So in theory, if an owner is aware of the game and knows, oh, this is from KMC, I'm not signing for it. I've been through the collections process before. I know what that is. If I don't sign for it, I never got it, and they can't sue. So okay. Yes, it is. If you want to go that route, that's one of the downsides of it. We do that for some of our communities. And if your community is interested in having that done, talk to your property manager. We can, again, get that new DPR in place for your next billing cycle. And then we start following that process.
And talk a little bit about the lien or small claims court if somebody's selling their house. Where that's something that KMC handles. Talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, so just the closing process in general, ideally, any house that is put on the market, and we get contact from a title company because they know, oh, this property is in an association and they have a big master list of, who manages what association. So they'll see on their list, Kirkpatrick Management manages this association. This property is in that association. And we will contact Kirkpatrick because there's a contract to buy this property. They'll contact us. We will fill out our closing department. Justin Kersey primarily handles that, does a great job for us. He'll fill out a demand letter or an estoppel letter. They're called a lot of different things, but it's telling the title company, here's what is owed on this account. The balance is 0. The balance is 200. It's 500. That's for any account that is selling. Now, if it's in collections or has a lien filed against it, and we get that request from the title company, we send that request to the attorney, and the attorney provides that payoff letter to make sure that all legal charges, all lien costs, all of that is collected at closing. So the attorney gets paid in full, and then the file gets closed once the paperwork is received and the money is received from the title company from the closing. So if it is in closing or a property is being sold, everything gets collected by the attorney. If it's not, it comes to Kirkpatrick. Now, the danger is the property has a high balance and the title company doesn't get notified. Let's say an owner is a for sale by owner. They don't use a title company for the transfer of the property. If we never get told about it, there's not a whole lot we can do to try and collect, which is why on those higher balance accounts, it's always important to make sure you're protected by getting a lien, because even in those private sale, when you're transferring a property, if there's that lien in place, the association is getting paid from the closing because of that lien.
Okay. What about there was, I think you touched on this a little bit, but if an owner says they don't pay because we didn't cut their grass 30 times as opposed with that doesn't really, that does not hold mustard with the courts. Is that correct?
Nope. And now a lot of our small claims courts are somewhat debtor friendly. However, that one is a 100% ironclad. The contract between the owner and the association is very one-sided towards the association. The owner is agreeing to pay the dues regardless of services or amenities provided. Now, that's not an open invitation to just do nothing as an association, obviously. But if an owner is dissatisfied, there are other options that they have, other avenues that they have to resolve their dissatisfaction with the amenities being provided. Those would be attorney general complaints, or a logical outcome to that would be to talk with the property manager, go to a board meeting, voice your concerns that way. The protesting or refusing to pay the dues is not an avenue that ends well for the homeowner. 100% of the time, the judge has, previous cases that they go back to and say, I understand you're dissatisfied. Here's how you resolve it, but you still owe the dues.
Yeah. And then you don't have to have a judgment to file a lien, right? So those are two separate deals.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
And what about?
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, that's correct. You do not have to have a judgment. That's something that you can go that route where you get a judgment, the owner's not paying, and you would prefer at that point to lien and then foreclose instead of going through a lengthy garnishment process. Because if it's a large judgment, say $1,000, somebody doesn't make a whole lot in wages, and yeah, great, we got 25% of take home pay, and they take home, $500 a month. It's going to take a long time to pay off that judgment. So you get the judgment, you can file a lien and foreclose after that, or you can skip the small claims process entirely and go with the lien.
Can the HOA garnish personal property?
Excuse me. No. So garnished wages is the only option. The only option the HOA has in terms of garnishment, and we've had a lot of examples of boards. Well, this guy owes us a lot of money, and I just saw him bring home a huge new TV. Not much the HOA can do about it, unfortunately.
We're losing TJ, but he doesn't get to talk this much very often, so we're losing him. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions.
I'm good.
Okay, all right. So the closing costs, Meryl, we'll get back to you on the closing costs, closing questions, Meryl. If a deeded, so if the deeded owner is not the same address that is delinquent,
yep,
do you send the letters to the deeded owner and the home address? For example, a daughter lives in the home, but the parents own it.
Okay, so we send the default answer to that is we are required to send notices to whatever is on the deed. So whatever is on the deed as the mailing address, so where their taxes go, whatever is on the deed as the mailing address, that's where we send notices. Now we do have owners that contact us and say, hey, can you send any correspondence to this address and this address? So it's a perfect example. Whoever brought that up of, a daughter lives at the property, the parents own it. And the parents contact us and say, hey, can we get address, or can we get notices and the property address get notices? If we're notified by the homeowner, yes, we set it up to where they're both getting notices. But in terms of collections and what we're required to do, we are required to send notices to whatever is on the deed as far as the mailing address goes.
Okay. So I think the rest of these will probably be able to type an answer, and then that'll come with the we will follow up and send everybody a copy of this program and the slides, and I think Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but we do include the questions and answers, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So
Okay.
anything that we haven't had a chance to answer that are in the open questions now, we'll include that.
But yeah, so and I'm pretty sure most of your managers were on this presentation. So they if you have questions, you want to get a hold of them and ask them. And TJ, it's pretty incredible to have TJ, Joe, and Carla at our disposal, and they're all right here in town. So it's really very nice to be able to just ask him what's going on, how do we do this, and so your CAM should have all the tools he needs to answer any questions you've got. But other than that, I'd like to thank them for their presentation. It went very well, and we will follow up with you guys with this slideshow and the question and answers. And but we'll also have this. We have a Zoom channel. Sorry, we have a YouTube channel that this will be posted on later on, usually about this time next week. So thank you all, and we appreciate your time, TJ and Carla and Joe. Thanks for typing so well. That was good. Keeping up with everything. It's hard to keep up with all that. So lots of good questions. Thank you all.